let's dive into the matchup first. When TCU has the ball and is moving against this vaunted Georgia defense, a TCU team that is one of the best in the country when it comes to the home run play. We are still waiting the availability of Kondre Miller, but as we mentioned in Wednesday's show, DeMarcado did a great job filling in for him against Michigan. So what are the matchup points? Where is this part of the battle going to tip one way or the other? What is important for TCU's offense and or Georgia's defense to execute when those two units are on the field?
Can you cover Quentin Johnston? Because this is, I'm sure you guys know because we've been prepping for this, but if you just ask the general kind of college football fan who isn't a TCU fan, who isn't a Big 12 fan, who the second leading receiver on TCU is, do you guys know?
Darius Davis?
Davis, right?
As far as receptions, yes. Yards-wise, it's Tay Barber.
Tay Barber,
yeah. It's most people don't really know who the second and third receiver on TCU is because while they've been productive, Johnston has been, the alpha. He's the guy that's getting nearly, over half the target share. He's the guy that's getting, all the big plays, all that kind of stuff. So I think what Georgia's plan is going to be defensively is like they have to take Johnston out and then force TCU to beat them with everybody else. And also, I mean, this isn't matchup wise. I guess this would be more game planning wise, but force Duggan to stay over the middle.
Agreed. So one of the things here, I actually like this matchup, I think, and maybe I'll live to regret what I'm about to say and get actually and old takes exposed and whatnot. I don't hate the matchup here for Ringo on Johnston, right? Johnston's a really good athlete, but Ringo and he are similar in that they're both like linear, bigger athletes. I don't love Ringo against guys who have like great change of direction, smaller frame that force Ringo to stop start. So I'm really interested because both these guys are kind of built similarly. Like they both have good long speed. They're both long players. They're both pretty jacked. So like that to me is probably a better matchup for Ringo than some of these dudes who are better stop start, change of direction types. I'm very interested in that. I do think it's a decent advantage for Georgia that Georgia got to see how TCU attacked Michigan because Michigan is not a conventional Big 12 style defense, right? And they got him with some formation stuff in the run game. They got Michigan in the first half, at least I thought, tipping their rotations a little bit early. And so Duggan was able to ID that. So maybe, and we'll see how Georgia responds to tempo. But those would be some of my things to look for. Like, does Georgia stay in their looks longer? And can Georgia play the run on the way to the passer? I go back to what we talked about in the offseason when Kirby Smart did his Nike Coach of the Year talk. And he said, we used to think stop the run first. Now we think pass rush first, stop the run second, which if you still watch Georgia, I'm not even sure I buy that, but at least he said it, right? So can they focus on stopping TCU's pass and limit the run enough?
And like for quick qualification, when you're talking about tipping the rotations, it is the adjustments that a defense makes right before the ball is snapped.
Yeah, right.
And that is one thing that you should be able to watch for because Duggan was then able to make some adjustments. And when Bud's talking about staying in your looks longer, Georgia's going to wait till the very last second, and then you'll see some movement along those back sevens to deal with the coverage.
I'm torn on this one because, we were looking at matchups. I was either going to say it's Quentin Johnston versus Georgia's secondary is one of the most critical matchups, or it's every other receiver on TCU versus Georgia's secondary, right? Because if Georgia does decide to bracket, coverage with Quentin Johnston, or they have safety help, which all things they probably will have in their game plan, there's a couple counters. One, formationally, you can try to avoid that situation by moving Quentin Johnston in motion, which I think they'll try to do. But the times when they do bracket him, I think that's going to provide a lot of opportunity for TCU's other receivers to come up with plays. And I think I think Georgia's good enough. And what Bud was saying about how they've seen some of these formations, they're not going to get caught with their pants down. Like, we got a single on Quentin Johnston. Like, let's cross our fingers. I feel they'll be more ready to adjust so they don't get stuck in man-to-man with Quentin Johnston, and they'll be more willing to say, we'll go man with some of these other guys against these other athletes, and that's where I think TCU's role receivers, the other guys at receiver, are going to have to step up. And, I look back at Davis, or was it I think it was Tay Barber who had the big game against Baylor when Quentin Johnston was out. Like they've got some guys that did pick up the slack when Johnston was out. But I do think, yeah, if you could pick your shots and Quentin Johnston has a couple big plays, that'd be phenomenal. But I don't know if he's just going to go off for 150 plus with 2 or 3 touchdowns. You know what I mean? I just don't know if Georgia, with all the film they've got, is going to let them formation and motion them into bad spots.
And going back to the semifinal with TCU's offense, like the one thing that really surprised me in that game, like we talked about it in the build-up, Michigan's pass rush this year was not nearly as good as it was last year, but it was a lot better than it looked in that semifinal game. I thought TCU did a great job of just completely kind of stymieing Michigan's pass rush and also getting the ball out quickly. Because I don't think Michigan had a single tackle for loss in that game. I know they didn't have a sack. And I think that is something that is going to be key to this one too for that offensive line, because Max Duggan, like the numbers and just your eyes kind of tell you, he gets sacked a lot and it's not usually the offensive line's fault. I think Duggan takes a little too much time. Like if his first read isn't there, he takes a little too long to get to the second read to make his decision of what he wants to do after that. And I think that's why it's so pivotal for the Quentin Johnston thing, because that's usually your first read as far as Quentin, get him the ball. So I think if you're Georgia defensively, you want to keep Duggan in the pocket. You want to take away the kind of the outside of the numbers, force him to stay with inside and just kind of keep him hemmed in. Don't give him running lanes to escape. So it's weird, but you were mentioning how Georgia's Kirby says, you know, we're more worried about stopping the pass and then we'll take care of the run after it. I think you kind of have to do both here. I think you have to maintain your lanes in the center to keep Duggan from getting those escape routes, to keep plays alive, because he will hold on to the ball and you can get to him if you do.